Welcome to the Hardwood Hustle powered by PGC Basketball. We believe in the value of a coach. We're here to educate, empower, and encourage you to lead like never before. Another season is just around the corner, and our job as coaches and leaders is to be the expert. We don't have to have all the answers, but it does mean we have to constantly be learning and filtering information on and off the court so we can lead our teams in the right direction. In this episode, we talk about what that looks like and how it will help your team. Let's get started.
Welcome back to the Hardwood Hustle. We've got a good one today. We got the whole team here with Lisa and TJ and myself. And today we're going to talk about be the expert of your team. I'll say it again, be the expert of your team. And so when you hear that, coaches, it's really important that we're in clinic season. A lot of you are going to clinics or you're watching stuff online and you're learning from a lot of smart and brilliant basketball minds, and you can get better from. At the end of the day, you're the expert of your team for all the coaches listening. And so we're going to talk about that. TJ, start us off with an opening thought, and then we'll go to you, Lisa.
Man, I think I got a deep thought here. I was reading an article recently about a football coach who's had a lot of success, been there 19 years, and he kind of just quit in the middle of the season and said he's had enough, like parents and just complaining, all this stuff. He says it's just not worth it anymore. And the article talked a lot about how a lot of coaches aren't even getting started. They're walking away because it's just too much, right? And so I know that sounds off topic, but here's where it's on topic to me, is that it takes a lot more these days to be a good coach than it once did. And no disrespect to coaches in the past, because there's a ton of great coaches. But when I say it takes more, it doesn't take more basketball knowledge. It doesn't take more X's and O's. It just takes more of the other stuff, because you used to be able just to say, everybody, do this. And people just kind of fell in line and didn't order. When you say know your team, like I think it is more important these days to know what makes each player tick, to know how they like to be coached, to know whether they like a lot of praise or whether you can challenge them hard or whether you can do. And so when you're talking about knowing your team, like know your players, like know what they do. Are they a shooter? Are they good off the dribble? How do you put them into those spots? All of that, I think coaches across the generations probably could figure out to some degree, knowing your players from a basketball sense. But you have to know your players almost in every realm of, like I said, what their personality is, what their strengths are on the court, off the court, and so it just takes a lot more, I think, these days to be able to coach specifically off the court, and being able, how do I maximize getting their potential? And I just think that the part of it's just because maybe there's more that you have to do these days. And part of it's more because we recognize some of those things help us to be a better coach, that we know that, maybe at one point in time, like when I was growing up, you could yell at every player and, tell them to do exactly what you wanted to do. You didn't worry about feelings. Now we've learned maybe there's a better way to do it. Maybe actually, if you can speak to their personality, their heartstrings, that you can coach them better. So that was my big thought going into it, Sam, was just like, man, it does take a lot. Like it does require a lot of skills. And a big part of that is knowing each player, not only their skill set, but knowing them as a person as well.
I would just definitely add to that, in an initial thought, is just we take in so much nowadays with, people can get to us through our phones and in school, and now we have this sports realm, and there's just so much that young people are dealing with and trying to work through. We just went through this pandemic, and there's a lot of just pressures that can be put on us. And so I think, to your point about being the expert, it's really important because there's things behind the scenes that will affect your team. And, a parent could ruin a season, right? Like administrators or pressures, or your own family pressures that are happening, things that people are saying, social media, bullying, issues at home. Like, it's not that we have to be the fixer of all those things. It's just when we know what's going on, when we know what our staff might be working through. A lot of people working multiple jobs, like inflation, like all this stuff that's happening. I think that we have to just recognize that, man, we're going through a lot, and there could be things on the outside that this might not be an X's and O's thing. This might not be this player is uncoachable. It might just be that we need to recognize and have empathy and see where they're coming from so that we can work through those things together. And I know that's a lot for coaches, but knowing what's going on behind the scenes, I think will mean more. It's going to develop stronger relationships, build more trust, and that's what's going to be able to take our teams to, where we want to go this season.
Yeah, that's good. And one other additional thought, like something you said, TJ, I think is important. If a coach left coaching 20 years ago and then got back in, so there's a 20-year gap, they would have a real challenge if they used their coaching style potentially from 20 years ago. I'm thinking in the last 20 years I've been coaching, I've seen this shift and it's gradually happened. And I played for a lot of coaches where it was like, hey, you just do what the coach says. There wasn't a lot of why behind the what. There wasn't a deeper explanation. I agree wholeheartedly that today's coach has to be a better coach, has to be a better reader of the room, has to be better with interpersonal skills, emotional intelligence than 20 years ago. And so there are, and you talk about this, TJ, a lot at our clinics and just with our coaches, and we're trying to educate. You're a lawyer, you're a psychologist, you're a parent sometimes, you're a coach, you're a teacher, you're an empathizer, you're wearing many hats that coaches are not trained in schooling. Doctors are trained to be doctors. Coaches are taught X's and O's, yet it has very little to do with X's and O's. And you do have to be the expert. And it's hard enough being just a lawyer or just a psychologist, yet you're putting on these different hats every day. So speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, and again, like I think John Wooden would be fine in this day and time, just like he would have been fine 30 years ago, 40, like he would have been fine. But there are a lot of coaches that would, like you alluded to, struggle with that. Like Bobby Knight's style of coaching doesn't fly anymore. It doesn't work with players, and also doesn't allow you to keep your job in a lot of places, and so so when I don't want to group every coach into that bucket. I'm just hesitant and careful to do that, because I think John Wooden's style of like caring for players, teaching life lessons, his ability to coach X's and O's, like that is transcends all of time. And I think that's what the really, really, really good ones do, because they were on both sides of it. But yeah, I think that knowing everything about those players and then putting them in places to be successful, because that's what we're trying to do at the end of the day, is trying to put players in a place to be successful. And when we're asked, like you said, Sam, to do all of these things, we've got to persuade them. We've got to be the lawyer. We've got to be the doctor that diagnoses the problems, gives prescriptions. We've got to be, you went on the long list, and we've got to do all of those things. And that's where it becomes more complicated. And honestly, really, really hard. I mean, let's just say that you did know every player, not even from a personal standpoint. You just knew them from an X's and O's standpoint. One really good driver, one really good post player, one really good shooter, one kind of does a little bit of everything average. You still got to put all of those 5 pieces together and work them in accordance, right? And so that doesn't work in every offense. There are certain things that will highlight one player over another in a particular offense. Then you can try and fix it by running set plays where every set play people go to their spots, but you also know those will be scouted at some time. And so really being able to be an expert on your players on the offense or defensive end outside of the mental piece of it, there's major challenges in doing that, and you got your work cut out for you. And I think what really good coaches do on the offense and defensive end is they know, and that doesn't just mean their skills or what they can do well. It means age, stage, their ability to take on knowledge. If you're double switching screens on the backside, and is that appropriate for 8th grade, 9th grade? You might know that, but are they capable of doing that? And so not only do we have to know what we're trying to accomplish, we also have to know if the learner is capable of taking that and doing that. And on top of that, we got to be a teacher that can communicate that in a way that they understand it and are able to perform it without overthinking. Like there's just a lot of layers to being a really good coach.
I want to say too, you got to science the art here. You got to science the art, meaning, and I know y'all like that. You can tweet it later. At our clinic this past weekend, we had Mike Neighbors there. And we've talked about this before, where I want to thank the pastor, but we talked about how you put names of your players on your practice plan. Like, hey, I need to connect with Lisa. I need to connect with KJ today. And so you just put their name, or you might even, I put a little note next to it of something I want to speak to them about that has nothing to do with basketball. And I love what Neighbors did. He does this, he says, on his practice plans. He writes down the names of every player. and he's got to get 3 touches with each player. And so what he does is once he gets the first touch, he circles it. He gets a second touch, he slashes it, and then when he gets the third touch, he just X's it. And that was just a big aha moment. It's like, why am I not doing that? I got to do that every single practice. And it might not be a 5-minute conversation. It could be a simple touch, like, great to see you, Lisa. But that's science. The art of relationships take art. You, Lisa, TJ, we all have different nuances to our personalities. And so there's an art to how we talk to each other and how we relate to each other and how we sympathize and how we work through tension. But you can science the art. And I think this is a tangible thing that coaches can do with your teams and your players. If you're going to be the expert of your players, you have to get to know them. That is an art, but you can science it and build it into your everyday practices, whether on the court or out of season or sending a text message or whatever it is. So, Lisa, speak more on that if you don't mind, and some things that you've done or seen that work really well on how you be the expert with your players.
Well, I'll talk about one that I have a couple friends that do as coaches, and they do the pre-practice or day of practice survey. It's a few questions, and it could be for the week. What do you have going on this week? What's going on? Is there anything at home? Is there anything that I can be aware of or whatever? But also, how are you doing today? If it's a daily one, like, how are you feeling? Like, just getting a pulse on your team. And for some head coaches, maybe they're looking after 40 players in an entire program, 50 players. Maybe it's 20 players just on your team. And so it's a lot to try and take in. And so she goes through just the list before practice each day or each week, and then is able to assess quickly, how's the team feeling? How are we doing after this road trip? What were our best takeaways from the road trip? We just went 0-2. How do they feel about it, right? And so I really I think that's a good way to do it. It's like a Google form each day, comes in a spreadsheet, she checks it off, and can feel more confident, because it's really hard to ask 20, 30 players, even 10 players, how they're feeling about that. And so that's one practical way, just on keep the pulse of your team throughout the season. But I think one thing for me is I just try to, it's like kind of the hi and bye rule. I try to say hi to every player before practice, and, walk in 10 minutes early. They're shooting around, getting warmed up, and just, having a quick chat. Like, sometimes, yes, you can do a touch and a hello, but it's just more meaningful to, especially as an assistant coach, I think I have a little bit more leisure in doing that, and just checking in. Hey, how are you doing today? And ask about a family member, ask about a test that I knew they had. And so I've heard, just recently, how much they appreciate that. And so that just gives you a pulse on, how do they show up every day? Are they consistent? Are they up and down? Is today different? And then you can take that into the practice, and you're taking notes. I think the other practical thing you can do during practice is just take more notes and better notes. It'll help you stay informed.
No, I love that. And I've got a younger coach who started with BCB recently, Lisa, and they don't do that right now. Like what you said, the say hi. And that's a little thing that takes what? Sometimes it takes 3 minutes, maybe 10 minutes of going around every player, getting a high five or a fist bump, looking them in the eye, smiling, saying hello, what's up, whatever it is. It is a small thing, and that small investment has huge ROI, huge dividends. And so this coach that just joined us, like, he's in the gym, and he's over there shooting on a basket and just like doing his own little workout when I'm going around and getting all these touches. And so my coaching to him was like, hey, you're missing out on big opportunities just to get a touch. I said, do you know every name of the kid in the gym? And he didn't. Like, we'll go around, learn their name, write it on the piece of paper. And I just think there's a lot more you can do to science it. So here's another tangible thing, Lisa, that I have not done. I haven't done this, but been brainstorming about this the last few days and leading up to this recording that we're doing. And that's, if you know how some players, some adults, some coaches, we're not always great at communicating how we're feeling about something, and we may not want to say it. These aren't just limited to players, a lot of adults. Okay. What if on your team you had a buddy system? And so if Lisa and Christy are buddies, and Lisa, you're going through something and Christy knows it, and it's Christy's job to know it, but you don't really feel comfortable knocking on the coach's door and sharing that. But it's something going on in your personal life. It could be something going on with the team. You're not happy with your role. It could be something the head coach yelled at you the last 2 days, but it's just making you feel some kind of way. But it's Christy's job, and this would be done with permission, to go to the coach and say, "Hey, coach, I just wanted you to know, Lisa's struggling with this." But Lisa didn't feel comfortable going to the coach. Like, I think about how many times that could save a player, save a team, if that was communicated. But there's a safe place where Lisa's given permission to Christy to go do it, and the coach has no judgment on Lisa not feeling comfortable for communicating that to the coach, and then the coach can do with it how they see fit. Like, what do you think about that idea? Because I think that could be a pretty powerful tool.
Well, I'm interested to hear TJ's thoughts, but I think in some teams it would be great, and in some teams it could backfire. That's just my initial thought. I don't know more.
Okay, so and then TJ can answer this. Well, then my last question, let's get to a baseline. Do you agree that on every team in America right now there are 1 to 8 players who have something going on personally or on the court that the coach doesn't know about, but the coach needs to know about? Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. TJ, what do you think about that idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that came to mind for me here is that a lot of times you can listen to something, whether it's a clinic or another coach, or give advice on different things. And I've done this in the past and only learned from this way, is that, like, I gave some advice on things we do in our culture. And sometimes people try to cherry pick what we did and put it into their culture, right? But if the environment hasn't been created, a lot of the things that you do in your culture won't actually work. And so, Sam, I think your question is loaded. I think it depends what the environment and the coach has created. So, for example, if that coach has created a place of, like, the why behind the what, like, we want you, and we know everybody's not comfortable. We want you to be able to this. There's a guaranteed no judgment on it. We feel like it's better being known than not known. And the level of comfortability, but if all of a sudden a coach comes back to that person and like, well, and they respond, well, why didn't you tell me first? And they coach passes judgment on why they did that. So I do think it can work. I just think that it has to be the right environment and the right level of leadership to make something like that work. And so somebody just cherry picking that and putting that into their program, age, stage, male, female, leadership for the group, that could be dangerous, And so I think if it's something you want to implement and you're committed to, I think you have to put some pretty good rules behind it so people feel safe to do that.
I think that's a great point. It's similar to, you and I've talked about this over the years. Like, you get the email from the coach who's run the read and react, and they're asking you questions about the read and react offense. And based on the questions you're asking, you're realizing this is not a understanding of the offense in X and O. This is not a system and strategy. 2 teams can run the read and react, but one team does it with great force. They cut with force. They move the ball. They play strong with it. Another team doesn't do that, but they're running the same offense and they're getting entirely 2 different results, and they have the same type of players. So coaches that are listening, I think what TJ just said there, to highlight in my own words, I think that's really important. You got to prime the environment. Whatever tactics you use from another coach, and again, going back to our topic here, be the expert. Lisa's the expert on her team, and TJ's the expert on his team, and Lisa might do something that TJ could take. But if TJ doesn't prime his environment and get the players buying into other things, it could land flat. So really, really good point. Where else do coaches fall short on not being the expert of their players?
I think in just straight basketball side, like what we've been talking about is the mental side and the relationship side and all that. And look, I'll be honest with you. Like, I don't know that a lot of coaches got into it for that reason. I'm sure a good percentage did, but I'm sure there's a percentage that didn't, and so like wanting to be good at that is the first step. And then investing the time to be good at that is a whole nother step. And even when you do all that, the journey's still rough. Like it's people. And so there's a lot of work involved in there, I mean, and so but then flip over to the other side. And I think being an expert on the court, like being an expert on what your players do well, what they don't do well, what things go right for them and wrong for them in different situations. If you're the expert on your player and where they get themselves into trouble, you can fix that in player development. You can fix that in the film room. You can help them get better in those areas. Just like if they do something really well, and you can teach them to try and live in those areas more and stay away from the areas they don't do. Like I feel like there's just a lot of that breakdown of knowing. And a lot of times what I see is coaches run a particular offense. Let's just say it's ball screen continuity and everybody's coming off ball screens, and, one player continues to turn the ball over coming off the ball screen, but that's their job, but they're not really that good at it. Like you have to give that person tools to be successful in that, whether it's develop them as a ball screen or at least help them to be good at reversing the basketball to not get in the ball screen so they can just be a shooter, And I think a lot of times we just have an offense. We run read and react. We run dribble drive. We run ball screen continuity, whatever offense it is that we run. And we just expect everybody to be able to do all of those things within the offense that is the required of them doing that in the offense, which isn't always the case. I mean, and I think that being the expert of your player so that you get them out of spots they don't need to be in and into spots they need to be in, and then develop the spots they need growth in. I think that's being an expert on your player when it comes to the game of basketball.
One area for me in becoming an expert, I think, is shot selection. And what kind of shots are your individual players getting, taking? How is your offense generating those shots? Are they playing within the system or outside the system? So I think for me, I've just seen on teams where maybe if players aren't comfortable with the offense, then they start to do their own thing, and you're getting shots that maybe you didn't think or didn't want. Or maybe you have a player who's creating an opportunity. They're just super aggressive at getting to the rim, and you realize, wow, our offense needs to create more opportunities for that, and they're not getting enough. Like they're just that's just their style of play, and now we need to pivot or adjust and make that more of an opportunity for them throughout the season. So there's different things as you're watching film of it. You can't just look at, shooting percentage or 2-point field goals and 3-point field goals. There's a lot to that where, some of your best shooters might even have a lower percentage three. It doesn't mean they're not as good as shooters. It means sometimes you need them to take harder shots. I know we talked about that previously on an episode. And so we just have to look at the why behind the what, and how what we're doing, and as coaches, the responsibility that we have, and as leaders that we have to make it work for our team as best we possibly can, putting players in positions to be successful. But I think that takes time to dive into the film a little bit and not just take the stat sheet at face value.
Yeah, that's good. That brings up a Dick DaVinzio term of, know your Scott, your scoring spot. And, as coaches, we got to know where our players. This is another clinic conversation that I thought was really good. And that is coach asking their players, who wants to take, do you want to take the final shot? And some players distinctly say, no, I don't want the ball in my hand. Well, that you need to know that as a coach. Don't assume that player wants to have this ball in their hands for the final shot. So when only 3 players say they want it, you know that going into a game. You don't have to share it with the whole team, but as a coach, you need to know that on the court, who wants the ball. And that would be another example of what you got to know. What else, TJ, do coaches need to be the expert and know about their players on court as basketball players?
Well, I think about just tying all that together. I mean, we talk about this in our blueprint a lot, but like you might know all the things they need to do offensively, but going back to the previous one, this isn't necessarily their learning style or whatever, but like what makes them click? Like if their confidence is low, even if they're in their Scott, are they going to make that shot? Like building up the confidence of that shooter, or if they're not being pushed hard enough, they're not getting enough game-like reps because so I think the holistic approach of what really makes somebody tick, even if you get them in their Scots. And then I think being an expert, I think another way to be an expert is to make them an expert. And so when a player clearly knows their role, when they really know what is desired from them, what they need to win at, what they need to be working on, what they like, I think that means you really know your players and their players really know themselves. And I think, more important, as important as being an expert on your players being an expert on themselves. So I think you might know all that information, but can you transfer that information to help them become an expert at whatever their role is, the job is, what they need to be working on? I think that's an important piece of developing a player well.
Yeah, I would just, I guess, add in there as you guys were talking. I totally think that's true. TJ is just empowering and equipping our players to, as much with our knowledge as we can, as much as where we're taking the team. I think that's part of like casting a vision, like where are we headed? I know we've talked about recently. It was just like, hey, we're not trying to win the conference tournament in October. Like this is a process, and we're not where we want to be, but that's okay. And so just kind of, I think that is a little bit freeing for players because they know they want to be better. We know we're not, up to standard in certain areas, but like we're all in on the process. And like that's what really, we know what we're doing here as coaches. We know that this is a long season. And so I think that's part of it too. And the other piece I think coaches can miss on sometimes is just putting players in a box. And so you think you've become the expert on a certain type of player. Oh, I've coached somebody like that before, or this player can only do this. But I think we always have to be open to being surprised, to players who are able to turn on, flip the switch. Or I think we've all seen it from a player go from freshman to a senior, that all of a sudden the light bulb turns on for them and they become a different player and they mature, whether it's on the court or off the court. And so just being mindful of being the expert is we are still the learner, through every relationship and every team that we coach. I think, you guys would say that's true as well.
Yeah, and I really like what you that's a good share, Lisa, as well. And I like what TJ you said a moment ago about teaching our players to be the expert. I don't think that happens enough. I don't think we're teaching players how to be evaluative of themselves and assess. They don't know their own game. They just don't. I mean, it's obvious. I'm on court this time of year with a lot of different players, a lot of different programs, and that's one obvious thing. I have a family member who is an alcoholic. They're recovering, they're sober, but we all knew they were an alcoholic. And when did they become sober? When they realized they were and they decided to. And so we have to teach our players how to identify their own problems, their own strengths. And gosh, that's what a true player-led team is. So I really like that little nugget that you shared, TJ. So as we round out and finalize this conversation, let's get some parting thoughts. Lisa, why don't you go first, and then TJ?
I love going first, Sam.
I know you do.
I think this is a really great conversation just to, evaluate ourselves as coaches and say, where are we at right now? We're listening to this episode and how well do I know my team and how could I know them better? And whether that's X's and O's wise or do you have the out of bounds, package for your team this year that leads to, puts players in position to be successful, but leads to your strengths as a team? Or is it just the out of bounds package that you've always run, right? Like, I think we can just take a tally of certain things and where do we want to invest our time on? Is it a people thing? Is it an X's and O's thing? Is it a player development piece? And just dive into that this season and then continue as we become more of an expert on our team this season, that we also stay open to being a learner all season long, because there's things we're going to learn this season that we're going to take with us for the rest of our coaching career.
Yeah, those are really good, Lisa, and I agree with you, especially the part about just kind of evaluating like where you're at. I would actually give coaches a challenge right here. Why don't you put down in an Excel sheet or something your roster, and then above it, like answer those questions, like how well do you know them? Like all right, well, what is so-and-so struggling with the most right now? What type of coaching does this person respond to best? How would I say their confidence is? What do I think their biggest strength is? What do I think the most thing they need to work on? And you might even follow that up with a meeting and ask, that player, hey, Sally, what do you think's your greatest strength? And all right, it's different than yours. What do you think you need to work on the most? All right, it's different than yours. And so you don't really know. And maybe you do know, but they don't know. So it doesn't matter if you know and they don't know. Like you've all got to get on the same page there. So you could just simply do that with a couple of players and feel, well, how well do I know them? And even you, in a lot of cases, my parents knew me better when I was 18 than I knew myself, because sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And so I think it'd be a healthy practice for coaches maybe to put that down and don't worry about being right. Just worry about getting better. And how well do I know some of these things, and where can I get better at knowing these things, and what processes can I put in place to make sure that I'm knowing these things in the future?
Yeah, and coaches, being the expert of your players, it goes much further in this. I hope you took a lot of ideas. It's be the expert of your assistant coaches, ADs if you're listening. Be the expert of all the coaches. Parents can be the expert of your own kids, and also be the expert of yourself. I feel like I'm still learning more things about myself. And so coaches, are you still figuring out your own self and what makes you tick and what drags you down? Being aware of those things will allow you to be your best self so you can have your best season yet. That's just a big one. And TJ made note of your spreadsheet. I knew you were going to sneak in a spreadsheet there. But that is a good advice. Put it on
use a Word doc if you need to. Use a Word doc if you need to.
Word doc and write it on a legal pad. But yeah. So coaches, go be the expert of your players, be the expert of yourself. And that's just one avenue to having the best season yet. That's Lisa, that's TJ, I'm Sam, and we are the Hardwood Hustle.
Thanks again for tuning into this episode of the Hardwood Hustle, where we believe in the value of a coach. Be sure to check us out on Twitter and Instagram at Hardwood_Hustle to stay up to date on the latest episodes and share your thoughts with our coaching community. From the Hardwood Hustle team, thanks again. We can't wait to be with you again next week.